Hi, Dream Team. I am excited to start our Unit 2 read aloud with you guys. We're going to learn about classifying animals by their characteristics today. So look at these animals you see here. We're going to learn a lot about these animals. What are some things they have in common? What are some things that are different about them? I see a fish and a frog or a toad, a hippopotamus, a snake, a bird, and some insects. Okay, they have lots of things in common and they have lots of things that are different. For example, a fish swims underwater and can breathe underwater, but a bird can't, right? But we know that a toad and a fish and a hippo and sometimes some snakes can swim, so that's something they have in common. Right? I can look at the pictures and I can see they all have eyes. Well, I can assume the snake has eyes. I can't really see its eyes. All right, so we can observe information from these pictures. So what do we know about where these animals live and what they eat and how they live in the world? All right, we're going to learn a lot more about these animals during our lessons for the next few weeks. Insects are the largest group of animals, all right, and we're not going to talk as much about them, but they make up the largest amount. So we're going to look at a classification chart quite a bit every day, and we're going to be filling it in. There are so many animals that it is important to put them into groups based on their characteristics. This process is called classification. So characteristics are things that you are used to describe the different animals. Okay, so they might have unique characteristics that no other animal has, and then they might share some with some other animals. Okay, so this is the chart that we will be using, and we're going to look at it together during our wrap-up today and start filling some parts of it out. But we're going to learn a lot about these different animal groups and whether or not they're cold or warm-blooded, vertebrates or invertebrates, body design, their habitats, their reproduction, their pattern. There are some pattern breakers. So pattern breakers are animals in the category that go against the characteristics that usually fit that group of animals. And then we'll talk about our local animals that we have in Kentucky that fit into these different groups. So as you can see in the insect column, that insects are cold-blooded, they're invertebrates, and we'll talk a lot about what that means. They have an exoskeleton, an outside skeleton. Their skeleton's on the outside of their body. They live on land and water and underground. Most of them lay eggs. A pattern breaker is the aphids, which some of them give birth to live young, so they don't lay eggs like most insects do. And then think of some local animals, local insects that we have. I'll ask you about that during our wrap-up today. So what is the difference between living things and non-living things? So living things are plants and animals, right? And they grow and they get nutrients and they change. Okay? So let's look at some. So we have non-living things and we have living things. And then scientists put living things into categories called kingdoms. We have the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. So let's look at some examples. So would a lion be part of the animal kingdom or plant kingdom? Good, a lion is an animal, we know that. What about an oak tree? An oak tree is in the plant kingdom. Trees are plants. A rock. A rock is not a living thing. Does it grow or get nutrients? No, it doesn't grow itself. It might get bigger with different weather patterns or smaller with different weather patterns, but it doesn't grow on its own or get nutrients. So a rock is a non-living thing. What about a turtle? We know a turtle is in the animal kingdom. What about a television? I don't know about you, but my television is not living. It does not live. It is a non-living thing. What about grasshopper? A grasshopper is in the animal kingdom. And what about a rose bush? A rose bush is in the plant kingdom. Is it recording? Yes, it's recording. Double checking. Hold on. Let me go back to it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom is broken into even smaller parts. Okay? So we're going to look at those different parts today. All right? Each kingdom is broken into smaller parts. So we're going to talk about that. So your purpose for listening today, you're going to hear about 5 animal groups. And you need to listen to find out their names and how scientists group them. So here is our narrator. His name is Rattenborough. And look at all these animals we're going to learn about. I'm back. Does anyone remember me? It's me, Rattenborough, animal expert and world traveler. We've explored a lot of animal habitats together, haven't we? From hot savannas to cold Arctic regions, we've watched hungry carnivores eat their prey with very sharp teeth, while herbivores feast on grass nearby. Today I've got great fun in store for you. I'm going to present a slideshow, but before I do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how scientists understand animals. Think about all the different types of animals on Earth: grasshoppers, penguins, rabbits, lions, salmon, turtles, and salamanders are just a few. What other animals can you name? Wow, you know lots of animals. How do you tell them apart? How do you recognize or identify them? We're going to learn more about that, right? So here's a bunch of different kind of animals that you can see in this picture. One way that we make sense of our world is by sorting things into categories or groups. Look closely at these pictures of a salamander and a squirrel, and notice their characteristics. Can you name any way that a salamander and a squirrel are alike? How are they different? So we can see that they both have eyes, they both have legs, right? And nostrils. We see they can both walk. They can both breathe air because they're on land. We see that. What other characteristics can you think of to help sort animals into categories? So scientists use different categories to sort animals. In the mid-1700s, about 250 years ago, a Swedish man named Carlos Linnaeus became fascinated by the many different ways that people all over the world were grouping animals. Some people grouped animals by how they looked, others grouped them by their habitats, and still others by where animals lived. It was all a great mumbo-jumbo, so Linnaeus decided to use their ideas to create a worldwide system to classify or group animals based on their shared characteristics. This science of classifying organisms is called taxonomy. Using new ideas and new tools, scientists have continued to study organisms and the ways they are similar and different. Over time, ideas about how to classify animals have changed somewhat. Let's look at this living things chart. Scientists currently recognize 3 groups of living organisms based on different parts within their cells. So Cells are the tiny building blocks of organisms. We'll talk a lot about cells when we talk about the human body next unit. Scientists generally agree that these groups of organisms are then divided into kingdoms, the main groups into which all living organisms have been further classified. Plants and animals are the two kingdoms that I know the most about, and today I'm here to talk to you about my favorite one. That's right, the animal kingdom. Taxonomists identify animals by their characteristics, or special features that set them apart from others. They divide the 5 kingdoms into smaller and smaller groups, with each smaller group having more and more in common with one another. Each group has a specific name. For example, you and I not only belong to the same kingdom, the animal kingdom, but we both belong to the same phylum, the phylum known as Chordata, because we share similar body characteristics. Okay, so you can see the living things and how they're broken into kingdoms, right? We're going to talk about the animal kingdom. And it's broken down to vertebrates and invertebrates. Where do you see people? What about spiders? Very interesting. Most animals in the phylum Chordata are vertebrates. A vertebrate has a backbone. Do you have a backbone? Yes, you do, and so do I. That is one of our common characteristics. One of the ways that scientists group us to show relationships between us. My backbone is smaller than yours because I'm much smaller, but if you look closely at this image, you can see how similar the backbones are. So you see on the little girl's back, you can see her backbone. And then think about a mouse, right? Because Rattenborough is a mouse and how small a mouse's backbone is, but they sure do have one. Vertebrates belong to the animal kingdom and are the phylum Chordata. This phylum is divided into even more groups called classes. A class is divided into smaller groups called orders, and an order is divided into smaller groups even called families. A family is divided into even smaller groups called a genus, and a genus is divided into even smaller groups called species. There are many, many species within each group. Ooh, that's a lot of groups. A little more than 95% of all animals on Earth are invertebrates. So that means they don't have a backbone, right? If you know that, now that you know that vertebrate is an animal with a backbone, what do you think an invertebrate is? An animal without a backbone. Think about it. More than 95% of all the species of animals on Earth, that's a lot of invertebrates, and most of them are fairly small. Fewer than 5% of all animal species are vertebrates. That means that you and I and all vertebrates belong to a very small percentage of all the animals on Earth. Mammals, that includes all humans, are literally just a speck. So that's a lot of invertebrates. Wow. So you can kind of see these squares. If that big blue square represented all the invertebrates, mammals at the very bottom of the list would just be a teeny tiny speck in comparison. Now that you've heard a little about how taxonomists sort animals into categories, I'm ready to begin the slideshow of my worldwide travels, and I'm going to teach you all kinds of amazing things about animals. I met the most wonderful new animal friends while I traveled the globe, and so throughout this domain I will show you my slides so you can meet them too. They represent 5 vertebrate groups of animals. As they are introduced, remember to think about how a scientist might classify each one of my new friends. How is each one like you, and how is each one different from you? Here's Polo Piranha from Colombia. This is Tabitha Toad from Brazil. Here's Anna Anaconda from Peru. This is Ebenezer Egret from South Africa. And meet Hilda Hippo from Tanzania. Please welcome Polo, Tabitha, Anna, Ebenezer, and Hilda to your virtual classroom. They are going to appear from time to time in my slides as you learn about the 5 vertebrate groups of animals. Be sure to keep a sharp eye out for them. You never know when one of them might turn up. Aren't they a handsome bunch? They all belong to the animal kingdom, like you and me. And they are like us in another way. They all have backbones. Now things get tricky. We are all animals and we are all vertebrates, but we are not all the same, are we? Heavens, no. We have lots of differences as well. You and I belong to the class or group called mammals. What makes mammals different from other classes of animals is that they have fur or hair, and the mothers give birth to live babies and feed their babies with the milk their bodies produce. You will learn more about these and other characteristics of mammals another day. My friend Hilda Hippo is indeed a mammal, even though it is hard to see the little bit of hair around her mouth and on the tip of her ears and tail. When I was in Tanzania, Hilda and I had a visit with a proud new mother hippopotamus. Look at her with her baby. Oh, so cute. So I'm a mammal, you're a mammal, and Hilda is a mammal, but my other friends have different classifications. One of them is in the reptile class, a scaly creature that likes to warm itself in the sun. Anna Anaconda. Isn't she beautiful? She's one of the largest snakes in the world. Though she is not poisonous, her strong muscles help her constrict or squeeze her prey. Ooh. Another of my friends is an amphibian, which means that she lays eggs and lives both in and out of the water. Most animals in the amphibian class have smooth, wet skin, but my friend's skin is rather dry and leathery. Who is she? Right again, Tabitha Toad. She looks a lot like her close relative the frog, doesn't she? Her skin helps protect her as it is camouflaged or able to blend into the environment. My last two friends should be easy to classify because their classifications names are much more common to all of us. Which one of my friends is a member of the bird class? Yes, Ebenezer egret. Ebenezer is a warm-blooded vertebrate with feathers. Polo piranha is the last of my friends to be classified today. Which group does Polo belong to? Polo piranha is a fish. He has fins and gills and lives in water. Piranhas, though small, are thought by many to be dangerous because of their very sharp teeth. Don't worry, Polo, like many other piranhas, usually feeds on dead and injured wild animals. There's all our friends. Taxonomists believe that all of the vertebrate animals on Earth can be classified into one of these 5 animal groups: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. In one of these 5 groups, there are 3 different fish classes. Fish also have the largest number of species among vertebrates. Even though there are more than 60,000 known species of vertebrates on Earth, there are nearly 1.5 million invertebrates, and 1 million of those are insects. Scientists continue to discover thousands of new insect species each year. How can this be? There are still unexplored areas of the Earth, far into the rainforests, inside the cold ice of glaciers, within the hot lava of volcanoes, and deep down in the ocean. Perhaps one day you will discover new animals yourselves, examine and classify them by their different characteristics, and add to our understanding of taxonomy. Would any of you like to be scientists when you grow up? That'd be pretty cool. Let's think about what you've learned today. Scientists classify organisms, including animals, in order to show relationship between them. Animals are classified by common characteristics. Vertebrate animals have backbones, whereas invertebrates do not. Some are warm-blooded, whereas others are cold-blooded. Let's think about other ways that scientists might classify animals. It is important to consider where animals live, their habitats. Do they live in water or on land? Do they live in warm climates or cold climates? What covers their bodies, feathers or scales, fur or hair? Do they lay eggs or do they give birth to live creatures that look like smaller versions of themselves? What kind of food do they eat? Plants, animals, or both? Excuse me. These are all important questions for taxonomists to ask as they work to group animals into categories that are easily studied. In the upcoming read-alouds, you will learn more about how animals are classified. Next time, we will pick up with a slideshow so that I can teach you about the groups of animals in which Tabitha toad, Anna anaconda, and Polo piranha belong. Can anyone make a prediction about which of my friends are warm-blooded animals like me? Well, you'll have to wait until next time to see if you are right. Okay, who is the narrator of this domain? Remember, the narrator is the person or character telling the story, right? So our narrator is actually a rat named Rattenborough. What are the 5 groups of animals that are classified as vertebrates? Okay. Let's see, can you remember the 5 groups of animals that we've talked about so far? We've talked about mammals, we've talked about amphibians, we've talked about reptiles, we've talked about birds, and we've talked about fish. So make sure you remember those 5 because we're going to use what we remember to fill in our classification chart in our afternoon wrap-up. What is the main characteristic that these 5 groups share or have in common? If you remember, all 5 of these groups are vertebrates. They all have backbones. You heard background information about a scientist named Carlos Linnaeus, who first developed the classification system we still use today. Why was taxonomy important to Linnaeus, and why is it still important to modern scientists today? If you remember, Linnaeus was really into different animals and putting them in categories, but he saw that people in different areas and different groups were putting them into different categories, and it was kind of confusing. So he made one taxonomy classification system so that everyone could classify animals the same way. It's important to know about different animals and their habitats. It still is today. So scientists still use that classification system. What are animals without a backbone called? If you remember, they're called invertebrates. The prefix in means none, or they don't have any, so no backbone. What are 2 important ways scientists classify animals? Well, we've heard already that scientists classify animals by whether they're vertebrates or invertebrates. And we're going to hear next time about how scientists classify animals into groups, whether they are warm-blooded or cold-blooded. Observe the animal characteristics carefully. How would you compare and contrast them? In other words, what similarities do you notice between a penguin and a trout? What differences do you see? If you were a taxonomist, how would you classify these animals? Why? So this is your short answer to do on the Ed puzzle. Look at the pictures to help you. Our word for today is classify. Say the word classify. In the read aloud you heard, the scientist Linnaeus decided to use people's ideas to create a worldwide system to classify or group animals based on their shared characteristics. The word classify means to sort or group animals or things according to common characteristics. In order to organize, study, and compare animals, scientists classify them by their common or shared characteristics. Have you ever had to classify something? What was it? All right, in the classroom we classify things, right? You might organize things by your different subjects. You might classify things by whether or not you do them in the morning or the afternoon. You might organize the colors of your crayons and classify them as blues or oranges. All right. So classifying is just a way of organizing things. We're going to look at this chart together at our afternoon wrap up. We're going to look at a picture of an elephant and talk about what we see and the unique characteristics of elephants. So start thinking about that before we come together again this afternoon. Good job, guys. I hope you enjoyed this lesson.